a barefoot, hungry boy slipped quietly through the gilded gates of a mansion and noticed the billionaire's daughter sitting alone in silence, her face shadowed by sorrow. Then, without hesitation, he did something extraordinary. He began to dance, not to beg, not for food, not for any reward, but purely to see her smile again. What unfolded next would ripple through every life it touched. The billionaire saw it all. At precisely 4:17 p.m., a thin silhouette moved across the security cameras and past the iron gates of the Lawson estate. Barefoot, gaunt, but driven. What that boy was about to do would shatter the heavy silence inside a home that had forgotten laughter, and the secret buried in his past would shake the world of one of the richest men in America to its core. But before that defining moment, there's something you need to know. This is not simply the tale of a rich man and a poor boy. It is the story of what happens when hope dares to step through a gate it was never invited to cross, when joy refuses to wait for permission, when a dance becomes the language of miracles, and by the time you reach the end, you'll rethink everything you believe about fortune, fate, and the unseen ties that bind us all. Richard Lawson sat in his vast study that afternoon, surrounded by numbers that had lost their meaning. His empire spanned oceans and nations, oil rigs in Texas, skyscrapers piercing the New York skyline, and trade vessels gliding through global ports. Forbes called him the man with the Midas touch. Wall Street whispered his name like a legend. He owned almost everything, except the one thing he could not buy back. Outside his tall glass window stretched the manicured gardens of his mansion. There, under a soft sun, his 8-year-old daughter sat motionless in her wheelchair. Amanda Lawson, once the heartbeat of his days, once the child who ran barefoot through the rose bushes chasing butterflies, laughter ringing through the estate like the bells of a Sunday morning. Now she was still, silent, hollow-eyed. 9 months earlier, the accident had rewritten their world. A November storm, slick roads along the Pacific Coast Highway. Elizabeth, his wife, was driving Amanda home from ballet class. The car that hit them had crossed the median drunk and reckless. Elizabeth died before help arrived. Amanda lived, but her spine did not. Richard fought against the odds, throwing his fortune at miracles. Los Angeles specialists, world-class therapists, Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, Boston neurosurgeons, every promise ended the same way. Her body could heal, perhaps. Her heart would not. Amanda spoke rarely. She avoided mirrors and movement. When the nanny rolled her into the sunlight each morning, she stared and drifted, her hands resting lifelessly in her lap. To the doctors, it was trauma and depression. To Richard, it was the quiet death of his daughter's spirit. Until that afternoon, Richard was scanning a stack of contracts when he heard it. A sound so strange, so impossible that it seemed like a hallucination. Laughter. Not polite laughter, not the brittle kind adults perform when they're tired of pain. This was real, unrestrained, alive, his daughter's laughter. He dropped the pen. It clattered loudly on the mahogany desk. Rushing to the window, he saw a sight his mind refused to register. Amanda was sitting upright, her back strong, her cheeks flushed pink. Her eyes, empty for months, sparkled. Her small hands clapped in rhythm, her shoulders shaking with bursts of joy. In front of her, twirling across the green lawn, a boy danced. He was rail-thin, barefoot, dirt clinging to his ankles. His shorts were ragged, his shirt torn near the collar, his hair wild and unkempt. Clearly a street child, one who looked at hunger in the face daily. Yet his body moved like wind wrapped in rhythm, like laughter turned physical. He spun in wild circles, flung his arms like a comic actor, and feigned a stumble only to spring into a somersault. Amanda's laughter rose, the real kind, the kind that heals. He hopped like a frog, strutted like a pompous rooster, collapsed in fake exhaustion, then leapt up again with a clownish grin. Richard's instinct screamed alarm. Who was this boy? How did he breach security? Was this some elaborate scam, a con, a distraction? His hand reached toward the receiver to summon guards. But then he looked at Amanda again. That face, the light in her eyes, the pulse in her smile, and he froze. For the first time in 9 months, his daughter looked alive. Her laughter echoed across the garden with the same reckless freedom it had before sirens and funerals filled their lives. The phone slipped from his hand. Hidden behind the curtain, Richard Lawson, the man who had purchased everything money could touch, watched a dirty, homeless boy accomplish what the finest medical minds in America could not. He saw his daughter return to life. And in that suspended moment, a truth bloomed in him. Money was not the strongest force in existence. Joy was, but the questions burned through his mind. Who was that boy? Why had he come? What possessed him to sneak into one of Los Angeles's most secure estates, simply to bring laughter to a broken girl? The answers to those questions would draw Richard into the deepest parts of the city, far from marble floors and business towers. He would soon be forced to choose between the armor of his reputation and the fragile heartbeat of his daughter's happiness. And at the end of that road waited a truth too shocking to imagine, one that would rewrite the story of his own family. But to understand that, you must first understand the boy. The city called him Cola. No last name anyone knew, no school, no records, no family. A ghost drifting along forgotten sidewalks, one of the countless invisible children who slept in shadows, under bridges, behind dumpsters, inside the shells of abandoned stores. He slept where the rain couldn't find him. The overpass behind the bus station, a cardboard fortress near a pawnshop, a doorway when the nights turned merciless. He scavenged what he could. Half-eaten sandwiches from park benches, leftovers from restaurant bins. On lucky days, his dancing earned him coins at traffic stops. On other days, insults were thrown instead. But Cola carried something the world could never strip away. He carried joy. When hunger gnawed, he danced. When loneliness stung, he danced. When winter wind bit through his skin, he danced. It wasn't just movement. It was survival. Prayer. Protest. The only way he knew to stay human. That afternoon, wandering along the boulevard lined with stone mansions, Cola stopped. Through the tall hedges, his gaze settled on a little girl in a wheelchair, her face heavy with the kind of sadness that swallowed sound itself. He recognized that expression too well. He'd seen it reflected in puddles when the world ignored him. He'd seen it on every forgotten kid who stopped fighting to be seen. It was the look of someone who'd misplaced their hope. And right there, he made his decision. He would make her smile, not for coins, not for anything except the aching understanding that sometimes the smallest spark of joy is the only medicine a soul needs. He glanced up the towering wall. No one was watching. His heart hammered as he scrambled silently through a small gap in the hedge and stepped onto the lawn. The grass was far too green, far too perfect. He took a breath, squared his small shoulders, and began to dance. At first, Amanda barely noticed him. Her eyes flicked in his direction and then back to the ground. But Cola persisted. He puffed out his chest dramatically, rolled his eyes, marched like a soldier, then froze mid-step as if a statue. When that didn't work, he wobbled like a robot with broken gears, twirled on tiptoe like a ballerina, and fell into a mound of oranges from an imaginary grocery cart. A sound broke the still air. A small laugh. Fragile but real, Cola's grin widened. He upped the act, twirling faster until the world blurred, stumbling into an exaggerated crash that ended in the grass, arms splayed wide. Amanda's laughter blossomed into the kind that can only come from a heart remembering how to beat again. It was, to Cola, better than a feast, better than shelter. It was purpose. He didn't realize he was being watched from above, that the man behind the glass saw him as both trespasser and miracle. He didn't know his dance had set off a series of events that would rewrite destinies. All he knew was that he had made a lonely girl laugh. And for a boy who owned nothing, that was everything. But the universe has a curious way of revealing secrets, and hidden in Cola's blood was one such secret. Something that would surface soon, in ways no one could predict. Because sometimes fate hides in coincidence, sometimes chance wears the disguise of destiny, and sometimes a homeless boy's dance is only the beginning of the story. Dancing in a garden is not just a random act of kindness. Sometimes it is destiny knocking. The question that would haunt Richard Lawson in the days to come was simple yet terrifying. What if this boy was not a stranger at all? What if the universe had brought him to this gate for a reason that went deeper than anyone could imagine? But Richard did not know any of that yet. All he knew as he watched his daughter clap and laugh was that his world had just shifted. The fortress of grief he had built around himself had developed its first crack. And through that crack, light was beginning to pour in. The boy finished his dance with a grand bow. Amanda clapped until her palms were red. And somewhere in the house, a phone rang. Security had spotted the intruder on camera. They were asking Richard what he wanted them to do. Richard looked at his daughter's face, then at the boy's hopeful eyes, and he made a choice that would change everything. "Let him stay," Richard said quietly into the phone. "I want to talk to him." Neither Richard nor Cola knew it yet, but that decision was the first step on a journey that would lead them through joy and heartbreak, through triumph and revelation, through questions that seemed impossible to answer, until the day a stranger would appear at the gate with a truth so devastating, so complete that it would shatter everything they thought they knew. But that moment was still to come. For now, there was only a boy, a girl, and the sound of laughter echoing through a garden that had been silent for far too long. And somewhere in the city, in shadows Richard could not yet see, a secret waited, patient, inevitable, ready to emerge and rewrite the story of the Lawson family forever. Months before Cola danced into the Lawson garden, Richard's life looked like a dream that other men envied. Hal lived in a 12-bedroom mansion in Bel Air, with views that stretched from the Hollywood Hills to the Pacific Ocean. His garage held 6 cars, each worth more than most Americans earned in a year. His closet was filled with custom suits from Savile Row. His watch collection alone could fund a small school. But Richard had not been born into wealth. He came from nothing, just like Cola. Richard grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Compton, one of the toughest neighborhoods in Los Angeles. His father worked double shifts at a tire factory. His mother cleaned houses for families who lived in neighborhoods like Bear, neighborhoods Richard would only see in magazines. As a boy, Richard watched his father come home each night with oil-stained hands and a back that bent a little more with each passing year. He watched his mother's knees grow swollen from scrubbing other people's floors, and he made a promise to himself. He would escape poverty. He would build an empire. He would make sure his family never struggled again. Richard worked 3 jobs to pay for community college. He studied business and economics, devouring every book he could find on real estate and investment. While his classmates partied on weekends, Richard studied financial statements. While they slept, he worked night shifts at a gas station, saving every dollar. By 25, he'd saved enough to buy his first property, a rundown duplex in South Central. He renovated it himself, learning plumbing and electrical work from YouTube videos. He rented it out, saved the profit, and bought another property, then another. By 30, he owned 15 properties. By 35, he had moved into commercial real estate, buying strip malls and office buildings. By 40, he had diversified into oil and shipping. The golden touch was not luck. It was obsession. It was sacrifice. It was a man determined to prove that poverty was not destiny. And then he met Elizabeth. She was a pediatric nurse at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Richard met her when he visited a business partner recovering from surgery. Elizabeth was checking vitals, her auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, her green eyes focused and kind. Richard, normally confident in any boardroom, found himself tongue-tied. He managed to ask her to coffee. She said no. He asked again the next week. She said no again. He kept asking for 2 months, until finally she laughed and said yes, just to stop him from bothering her. Their first date lasted 6 hours. They talked about everything. Elizabeth told him about growing up in Oregon, about her dream of opening a free clinic for children in underserved communities. Richard told her about Compton, about his parents, about the promise he had made to himself. Money is not evil, Elizabeth said that night, her fingers wrapped around a coffee cup. But it's not the answer to everything either. Therapist people I know are often the most miserable, and the poorest people I know often have the biggest hearts. Richard argued with her. He believed money could solve almost any problem. But Elizabeth just smiled. Maybe one day you'll understand, she said. They married a year later in a small ceremony at a chapel overlooking the ocean. Richard's parents cried. Elizabeth's mother called it the most beautiful wedding she'd ever seen, even though it cost less than the appetizers at most celebrity weddings. For the first time in his life, Richard felt something more powerful than ambition. He felt complete. Amanda was born 2 years later. Richard held her in the hospital, this tiny, perfect human who fit in his palms and wept. He had built an empire. But this was his greatest achievement. Elizabeth quit her nursing job to stay home with Amanda. Richard protested at first, offering to hire the best nannies money could buy, but Elizabeth refused. I didn't have a baby, so someone else could raise her, she said firmly. You build your empire, I'll build our daughter. And Elizabeth kept her promise. She was the kind of mother who made birthday cakes from scratch, who read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, who turned ordinary Saturdays into adventures. She taught Amanda to plant flowers in the garden. She taught her to bake cookies. She taught her that being kind was more important than being rich. Amanda adored her mother. They were inseparable. Every evening they would dance together in the living room, Elizabeth twirling Amanda until they both collapsed on the couch, breathless and laughing. Richard watched them from the doorway, his heart full. He worked 14-hour days, but when he came home, this was waiting. Laughter, love, light. He thought it would last forever. The accident happened on a Tuesday evening in November. Amanda had a ballet recital the following weekend and wanted to practice. Elizabeth drove her to the studio across town. The lesson ran late. By the time they started home, the sun had set and rain was falling. Richard was in a meeting when his phone rang. On a known number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Lawson. The voice was calm, professional. This is Sergeant Williams with the California Highway Patrol. There's been an accident involving your wife and daughter. You need to come to UCLA Medical Center immediately. Richard's world stopped. The voices in the conference room faded to white noise. He stood up, his chair crashing backward, and ran. He broke every speed limit, racing to the hospital. His mind refused to process what was happening. This was not real. This was a nightmare he would wake from. But when he arrived, the doctor's face told him everything. Elizabeth had died on impact. Amanda was in surgery. Her spine was damaged. They were doing everything they could. Richard sat in the waiting room for 7 hours. He did not eat, did not drink, did not move. He simply sat, his hands clasped, praying to a God he had stopped believing in years ago. When the surgeon finally emerged, his scrubs were still spotted with blood. "Your daughter is alive," he said. "But Mr. Lawson, you need to prepare yourself. The damage to her spine was severe. She may never walk again." The words hit Richard like bullets. He nodded mechanically, trying to process, trying to understand. His wife was dead. His daughter was paralyzed. How had his perfect life become a nightmare in a single evening? The months that followed were the darkest of Richard's life. He buried Elizabeth on a gray December morning. Amanda was still in the hospital, so she could not attend. Richard stood alone at the grave, surrounded by hundreds of people, and felt more isolated than he had ever felt in his life. When Amanda came home, the mansion felt different. The rooms that once echoed with laughter now echoed with silence. Amanda rarely spoke. She rarely smiled. She sat in her wheelchair staring at nothing, lost in a grief too big for an 8-year-old to carry. Richard tried everything. He hired the best physical therapists in California. He built a state-of-the-art therapy room in the mansion. He flew Amanda to specialists around the world: India, Germany, Japan, Switzerland, England. Every doctor said the same thing. Physically, she might improve with years of therapy, but emotionally she had given up. And no amount of medicine could fix a broken spirit. Richard spent millions. He made deals with God in the middle of the night. He would give away everything, his entire fortune, if Amanda could just be happy again. But money could not buy what his daughter needed. And slowly, Richard began to realize the truth Elizabeth had tried to teach him years ago. Wealth could build empires, but it could not heal hearts. The mansion became a prison. Richard worked less, spending more time at home, hoping his presence would help. But Amanda barely acknowledged him. She ate mechanically, she slept restlessly. She existed, but she did not live. Richard hired therapists who specialized in childhood trauma. They talked to Amanda for weeks, trying to break through, but Amanda built walls around herself that no one could penetrate. She was 8 years old and had already decided that joy was gone forever. At night, Richard stood in Amanda's doorway, watching her sleep, and wondered if he had lost both his wife and his daughter on that rainy November evening. Until the afternoon, Cola appeared. Richard had been in his study, reviewing a contract he had read 5 times without comprehending a single word. His mind was elsewhere, as it always was now. On Amanda, on Elizabeth, on the life that used to be. And then he heard it. Laughter. For a moment, Richard thought he was hallucinating. He rushed to the window, his heart pounding, not daring to believe. But it was real. Amanda was laughing, truly laughing. And the source was a boy Richard had never seen before. A homeless kid dancing like his life depended on it. Richard's first instinct was to call security, have the boy removed, arrested. But then he saw Amanda's face, the light in her eyes, the way her body moved with the laughter as if joy was physically healing her. And Richard understood something that would change his life. This boy, this stranger, this child of the streets was giving Amanda something Richard's billions could not provide. Hope. Richard made a decision in that moment. He would find out who this boy was, where he came from, why he had risked everything to make a sad girl smile. And if the boy was genuine, if his intentions were pure, Richard would do something he had never done before. He would let someone into his world who did not belong there by the standards of wealth or status. He would let a homeless boy into his mansion, into his life, into his heart. What Richard could not know as he watched Cola dance and Amanda laugh was that this decision would lead to revelations that would shake his understanding of family fate and the invisible lines that connect us all. Because Cola was not just a random street kid who happened to slip through the hedge. He was something else entirely. Something impossible. Something that would only be revealed when a desperate man appeared at the gate with a secret too terrible to keep hidden any longer. But that moment was still weeks away. For now, there was only a grieving father, a paralyzed daughter, and a homeless boy whose simple act of kindness had cracked open a door that had been sealed shut by tragedy. Richard picked up his phone and called down to security. "There's a boy in the garden," he said quietly. "Do not remove him. I'll be down shortly. I want to speak with him." And with that phone call, Richard Lawson set in motion events that would transform not just his daughter's life, but his own understanding of what family truly meant. The sun was setting over Bear, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In the garden, Cola finished his dance with a grand bow. Amanda clapped until her hands were red, her face glowing with happiness Richard had thought was gone forever. And somewhere in the city, in places Richard's cameras could not see, a man who had been running for years felt the weight of his secret growing heavier. Soon that man would come. Soon the truth would emerge. Soon everything would change. But for now, in the golden light of a California evening, a father allowed himself to hope. And hope, as it turned out, was the most powerful currency of all. Richard descended the curved staircase of his mansion slowly, his expensive leather shoes barely making a sound on the marble. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see Cola and Amanda in the garden. The boy had stopped dancing and was sitting cross-legged on the grass, talking to Amanda with animated hand gestures. Amanda was smiling, actually smiling, responding in a voice Richard had not heard in months. When Richard stepped through the French doors onto the terrace, Cola saw him immediately. The boy's entire body tensed, his eyes darted toward the hedge he had slipped through, calculating escape routes. Richard recognized that look. He had seen it in his own eyes as a child in Compton. The instinctive preparation for punishment that poor kids learned early. "Don't run," Richard said, his voice gentler than he intended. "I'm not angry." Cola stood anyway, his bare feet shifting on the grass. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to make her smile. I'll leave now. Daddy, please." Amanda's voice cut through the tension. "Please don't send him away." Richard looked at his daughter. Her eyes were bright, alive, her back was straight. She was leaning forward in her wheelchair, one hand extended toward Cola as if physically trying to keep him there. This boy had accomplished in 15 minutes what thousands of dollars of therapy had failed to do in 9 months. Richard would be a fool to send him away. "What's your name?" Richard asked, moving closer. "Cola, sir, Cola?" Richard nodded. "That's your only name?" "It's the only one I remember, sir." Richard studied the boy. He was perhaps 12 years old, though malnutrition made it hard to tell. His clothes were filthy and torn. His hair needed cutting. His feet were covered in small scars. But his eyes were steady, direct, not arrogant, but not ashamed either. "Where do you live, Cola?" The boy hesitated. "Different places, sir. Wherever I can find space. Do you have parents, family?" "No, sir." Amanda wheeled herself closer. "He lives in the streets, Daddy. He's all alone." Richard's chest tightened. He thought of his own childhood in Compton, how close he had come to this boy's fate. If not for his parents' sacrifice, if not for scholarships and luck, Richard might have been sleeping under bridges, too. "Why did you come here?" Richard asked. Cola looked at Amanda, then back at Richard. "I was walking past and I saw her through the gate. She looked sad, really sad. I know what that feels like, so I thought maybe if I danced, maybe I could make her laugh. That's all. I wasn't trying to steal anything or cause problems. He made me laugh." "Daddy," Amanda said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "He made me forget about everything. Can he come back, please?" Richard was silent for a long moment. This went against everything logical. You did not invite street kids into your home. You did not trust strangers around your daughter. You did not let random people past your security. But logic had not helped Amanda. Money had not helped Amanda. Medicine had not helped Amanda. This boy had... "Can you come back tomorrow?" Richard heard himself ask. Same time. Cola's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes, but there are rules. You come in through the front gate, not the hedge. You stay where I or the nanny can see you. You do not go into the house, and you leave when I ask you to leave. Understood?" "Yes, sir. Yes, thank you, sir." Amanda clapped her hands. "Thank you, Daddy." Richard nodded to one of the staff members watching from the terrace. "Give him food before he leaves and shoes. Find him proper shoes." That evening, after Cola had left with a full belly and a pair of sneakers that actually fit, Richard sat in his study nursing a glass of scotch. His business partner, Marcus Chen, had called earlier to discuss a potential oil deal in West Texas. Richard had barely listened. His mind was on the boy. On the way, Amanda had transformed in his presence, on the impossible choice Richard was facing. His phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. "Sir, I ran a background check on the boy. No records anywhere. No birth certificate, no school enrollment, no hospital visits. It's like he doesn't exist in the system. Should I investigate further?" Richard typed back, "No, leave it alone." He knew what his business associates would say, what the board members would say, what the mothers at Amanda's school would whisper. Richard Lawson letting a street kid into his mansion. Has he lost his mind? Maybe he had. But for the first time since Elizabeth died, Amanda had really laughed, and Richard would burn every bridge, destroy every relationship, sacrifice every ounce of reputation to keep that light in his daughter's eyes. Cola returned the next afternoon at exactly 4 o'clock. This time, the guards at the gate let him through without question. He walked up the long driveway, his new sneakers squeaking slightly, his eyes wide at the mansions and manicured lawns. Amanda was waiting in the garden, her wheelchair positioned where she could see the driveway. When she spotted Cola, she waved enthusiastically. "You came back?" "I said I would," Cola grinned. For the next 2 hours, Cola danced and told stories. He acted out scenes from the streets, imitating angry bus drivers and arguing market women with such accuracy that Amanda laughed until tears streamed down her face. He made up silly songs. He did cartwheels and handstands. He even convinced Amanda to try clapping along to a rhythm he created. Richard watched from his study window, pretending to work, but his eyes kept drifting to the garden, to the way his daughter's body language had changed. She sat taller, moved more, engaged fully. 1 day became 3, 3 became a week. Each afternoon at 4, Cole appeared at the gate. Each afternoon, Amanda came alive. But Richard noticed other things too. The way Cola never asked for anything before performing. The way he always checked to make sure Amanda was comfortable before starting. The way he ate the food offered to him slowly, savoring every bite, never wasting a crumb. This boy had nothing, yet he gave everything. On Friday of that second week, Richard made a decision. After Cola finished his performance and Amanda had been taken inside for dinner, Richard asked the boy to stay. "Walk with me," Richard said. They walked through the garden as the sun set, casting long shadows across the perfectly trimmed lawn. Cola was quiet, nervous, unsure what was happening. "You've been coming here for 2 weeks, Richard began, "and my daughter is different, better, happier. The doctor said it might take years of therapy to get her to this point. You did it in days. I just make her laugh, sir. That's all." "It's not all." Richard stopped walking and turned to face the boy. "You gave her hope. You gave her a reason to engage with the world again. Do you understand how valuable that is?" Cola shook his head. Richard took a breath. "I want to make you an offer. Move into the mansion. Live here, go to school. You'll have a room, food, clothes, everything you need. In exchange, you continue spending time with Amanda." Cola's mouth fell open. He stared at Richard as if the words were in a foreign language. "You want me to live here?" "Yes, but I'm nobody, sir. I'm just a street kid." "You're the person who brought my daughter back to life," Richard said firmly. "That makes you somebody very important." Cola's eyes filled with tears. He had spent so many nights under bridges, so many days hungry, so many moments invisible. And now a man who could buy and sell entire buildings was offering him a home. "I don't know what to say," Cola whispered. "Say yes," and Cola did. The news spread through the household like wildfire. The staff whispered. Some were supportive, others were skeptical. A street kid in the Lawson mansion. What was Mr. Lawson thinking? But Richard did not care. He gave Cola a room on the second floor down the hall from Amanda. He arranged for a tutor to assess Cola's education level. He bought him clothes, toiletries, everything a child needed. That first night, Cola lay in a real bed for the first time in years. The mattress was soft, the sheets were clean, the pillow cradled his head. He cried himself to sleep, overwhelmed by the impossible turn his life had taken. He had danced his way into a mansion, into a family, into a future he had never dared imagine. But as Cola would soon discover, not everyone was happy about his presence, and the road from street kid to family member was paved with challenges that would test every ounce of his courage. The whispers had already begun in the kitchens, in the guardhouse, in the garages where the drivers gathered. "He's using Mr. Lawson. He'll steal something. Mark my words, this won't last. Street kids don't change." And beyond the walls of the mansion in neighborhoods Cola used to call home, word spread that one of their own had struck gold. Some celebrated, others grew jealous. And one man, watching from the shadows of his guilt, felt his stomach twist with recognition. Because the moment that man saw Cola's face on a news segment about Richard Lawson's charitable act, something clicked. The birthmark, the eyes, the shape of the face. "No," the man whispered to himself in his cramped apartment. "It can't be." But it was, and the secret that man carried, the terrible choice he had made years ago, was about to claw its way into the light. Everything was about to change. But Cola, sleeping peacefully in his new bed, knew none of this yet. He only knew that for the first time in his short, brutal life, he was safe. And in the room down the hall, Amanda Lawson slept better than she had in 9 months, dreaming of dances and laughter and the brother she never knew she had always needed. Be honest, would you sit with Cola at lunch? Comment yes if you would. If you're not sure, let's see who their all ones are. Monday morning arrived with the kind of California sunshine that made everything look perfect from the outside. But inside Starlight Academy, Cola's first day of real school felt like walking into a battlefield wearing no armor. The school sat in the heart of Brentwood, one of Los Angeles' wealthiest neighborhoods. Its red brick buildings were surrounded by tall palm trees and expensive landscaping. Every student wore designer clothes. Every backpack cost more than Cola had earned in a year of dancing at traffic lights. Richard had enrolled both Amanda and Cola, promising the principal a generous donation to the school's arts program. The principal had smiled and agreed. Though her eyes held reservations, she was too polite to voice. Now, as Richard's driver pulled up to the entrance, Cola felt his stomach twist with anxiety. Amanda sensed it immediately. "Don't be scared," she said, squeezing his hand. "I'll be right beside you." But Amanda's presence couldn't shield him so much. The moment they walked through the main entrance, whispers followed them like shadows. Students stopped mid-con conversation to stare. Some pointed, others pulled out phones to text or take pictures. "That's a street kid. Lawson actually adopted him. My mom says he's probably a con artist." Cola heard every word. His ears burned, his hands clenched into fists. Richard's words from the night before echoed in his mind. "Hold your head high. You belong here as much as anyone, but belonging and feeling like you belong are two different things." In homeroom, the teacher introduced him to the class. "Everyone, this is Cola Lawson. Let's make him feel welcome." Scattered obligatory applause. A few genuine smiles from kids who looked curious rather than judgmental. But mostly, Cola felt the weight of skeptical eyes measuring him, finding him lacking. At lunch, things got worse. Amanda had physical therapy during the lunch hour, leaving Cola alone in the cafeteria. He stood in line, got his tray, and looked around for somewhere to sit. Every table seemed full. Every group seemed closed. Finally, he spotted an empty spot at the end of a table near the window. He sat down trying to make himself invisible. Within minutes, 3 boys approached. They wore expensive sneakers and designer hoodies. Their hair was perfectly styled. They looked at Cola like he was an exhibit in a zoo. "So you're the charity case?" The tallest one said his name was Brandon. Cola would later learn his father owned a tech company in Silicon Valley. Cola kept his eyes on his food. "I'm just trying to eat. Just trying to eat," Brandon mimicked in a mocking voice. "That's all you street kids do, right? Eat whatever you can get." The other boys laughed. Cole's jaw tightened. He remembered what Richard had said. "Don't let them provoke you. Your success is the best revenge." But staying silent felt like swallowing broken glass. "What's your real name, anyway?" Another boy asked. "Cola? That's not even a real name. Sounds like something you'd call a dog." More laughter. Cola stood up, his tray in his hands. He did not trust himself to speak. If he opened his mouth, he might say something that would get him expelled on his first day. "Where are you going?" Brandon stepped in front of him. "We're just asking questions. No need to be sensitive." "Move," Cola said quietly. "Or what? You'll dance at me?" Brandon's voice dripped with contempt. "That's what you do, right? Dance for scraps." Something inside Cola snapped. Not into anger, but into clarity. These boys wanted a reaction. They wanted him to explode, to prove he was exactly what they thought he was. A violent street kid who did not belong. He would not give them that. Instead, Cola looked Brandon directly in the eyes and spoke with a calm. He did not feel. "You're right. I danced for scraps. I slept under bridges. I went days without eating. And you know what? I survived. I made a little girl laugh when nobody else could. That's why I'm here. Not because I needed charity, because I earned it." Brandon blinked, caught off guard. Cola stepped around him and walked away, his head high, his hands steady, even though his heart was racing. Behind him, he heard one of the boys mutter, "Whatever. He won't last a month." Maybe they were right, but Cola was determined to prove them wrong. That afternoon, Amanda found him sitting alone on a bench near the art building. She wheeled herself beside him, her face concerned. "I heard what happened at lunch." "News travels fast," Cola said bitterly. "They're idiots," Amanda declared. "Brandon's failed 3 classes, and his dad just throws money at the school to keep him from getting held back. He's nobody special. He fits in, though I don't." Amanda grabbed his arm. "Listen to me. You fit in with the people who matter. The rest, they're just noise." Cola wanted to believe her. But belief is hard when you are surrounded by people who think you do not deserve to breathe the same air. The weeks that followed were a test of endurance. In class, Cola struggled with subjects he had never learned. Math was a foreign language. History was a blur of dates and names he could not keep straight. English was easier. He'd always been good with stories, but writing formal essays was different from telling tales on the street. The teachers tried to help, most of them anyway, but Cola could feel their doubt. could sense them wondering if he would ever catch up to students who had been in private schools since kindergarten. At home, Richard hired tutors. Kola spent hours each night studying, his head aching, his eyes burning from exhaustion. Sometimes he wanted to quit, to tell Richard this was impossible, that he was not smart enough. But then he would remember Amanda, the way she had learned to walk again through sheer determination. The way she pushed through pain and frustration, because she refused to give up. If she could do it, so could he. Still, the social isolation wore on him. Most students avoided him. A few were actively hostile. Only a handful, mostly kids who were outsiders themselves, treated him with genuine kindness. One was a quiet girl named Maya who loved to draw. She sat next to Kola in art class and never asked about his past. She just shared her pencils and sometimes showed him her sketches. Another was a boy named Jamal, whose parents had immigrated from Nigeria. He knew what it felt like to be different, to have an accent, to be judged for things beyond his control. "Don't let them break you," Jamal said one day as they walked to class together. "People like Brandon, they're miserable on the inside. That's why they need to make everyone else miserable too." Kola appreciated the solidarity, but it did not make the daily grind any easier. At night, lying in his comfortable bed in the Lawson mansion, Kola sometimes wondered if he had made a mistake. Life on the streets had been brutal, but at least he had known the rules. Here, the rules were invisible, constantly shifting, designed to remind him he was an outsider. But then Amanda would knock on his door, asking him to practice a new dance routine with her. Or Richard would sit with him during dinner, asking about his day, genuinely listening, and Kola would remember why he stayed. He was not just fighting for himself. He was fighting for them, for this family that had chosen him when he had no one. That realization gave him strength. One Friday afternoon, 6 weeks into the school year, a poster appeared on the bulletin board near the main office. "End after term talent show. Sign up now, all students welcome." Amanda saw it first. She grabbed Kola's arm, her eyes shining. "You have to enter." Kola's stomach dropped. "No way, why not?" "Are you kidding? In front of the whole school? They'll laugh me off the stage." "Or," Amanda said slowly, "they'll see what you can really do. Forget the whispers. Forget Brandon and his friends. Show them who you are." Kola wanted to refuse, wanted to stay invisible. But something in Amanda's voice reminded him of why he had started dancing in the first place. Not for applause, not for acceptance, but because movement was freedom. Because joy was resistance. Because dancing made him feel alive. "I'll think about it," he said. That night, Richard found him in the garden staring at the stars. The older man sat down beside him on the grass. "Amanda told me about the talent show." "Yeah. Are you going to do it?" Kola shrugged. "I don't know. What if I mess up? What if they laugh?" Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice low and serious. "When I was your age, I lived in a neighborhood where success meant surviving until tomorrow. Everyone told me I would amount to nothing, that poor kids from Compton did not build empires. They worked minimum wage jobs and died young." He paused. "But I had a teacher who told me something I never forgot. She said, 'Richard, the world will try to put you in a box. Your job is to explode that box and show them who you really are.'" Richard turned to look at Kola. "That's what this talent show is. A chance to explode the box. To show these kids that you are not just the street kid they whisper about. You're an artist, a performer, someone with a gift." Kola felt something shift in his chest. A small spark of courage. "What if I fail?" "Then you fail," Richard said simply. "But at least you failed trying, and that's worth more than never trying at all." The next morning, Kola signed up for the talent show. His hand shook as he wrote his name on the list. Other students watched, some smirking, some curious. Brandon walked by and saw Kola's name. He laughed out loud. "This is going to be hilarious." Kola did not respond. He just walked away. Amanda beside him, her hand in his. The talent show was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to prove he belonged. And somewhere in the city, a man sat in a cramped apartment staring at a newspaper photo of Kola at Starlight Academy. Thamon's hands trembled as guilt and recognition washed over him. He had tried to run from his past, tried to bury the terrible choice he had made. But the past has a way of surfacing, and soon that man would gather the courage to return to the place he had fled, to confess the secret that had haunted him for years, a secret that would shatter everything the Lawson family thought they knew. But for now, Kola focused on one thing. The dance, the performance, the chance to show the world that he was more than the labels they had given him. 3 weeks until everything would change. 3 weeks until the truth would emerge. 3 weeks until Ka's life would be turned upside down in ways he could never imagine. The rehearsals had begun, and with them, a countdown to a revelation that would redefine the meaning of family. Comment me if you've ever been judged for where you came from. The garden had become Kola's sanctuary, Every afternoon after school, while Amanda completed her physical therapy, Kola would practice his dance routine. He had decided to combine everything that made him who he was. The raw energy of street performance with the technical precision he was learning from YouTube tutorials. Richard watched from his study window, a small smile playing on his lips. The boy moved with a confidence that had grown over the past weeks. Where once Kola had been hesitant, almost apologetic for taking up space, now he commanded the garden like it was his stage. But Richard noticed something else, too. Sometimes between moves, Kola would pause and stare into the distance, a troubled look crossing his face. Richard recognized that expression. He had worn it himself as a young man in Compton, wondering if he truly belonged in the world he was trying to enter. The night before the talent show, Kola could not sleep. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through the routine over and over. What if he froze on stage? What if he tripped? What if Brandon and his friends booed him off? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Can I come in?" Amanda's voice came through the door. "Yeah." Amanda wheeled herself into his room. She wore pajamas covered in cartoon stars, her hair in a messy ponytail. Despite everything she had been through, she still looked like the 8-year-old girl she was. "Can't sleep either," she asked. "Too nervous." Amanda rolled closer to his bed. "Want to know a secret?" Kola propped himself up on his elbow. "What?" "Before the accident, before Mom died, he was supposed to perform in a ballet recital. It was going to be my first big solo. I practiced for months, but the night before the recital I got so scared I almost told Mom I couldn't do it." Kola listened, surprised. Amanda rarely talked about the time before the accident. "What did your mom say?" Amanda smiled, though tears glistened in her eyes. "She told me that being scared meant it mattered. She said, if I wasn't nervous it would mean I didn't care. But the fact that I was terrified meant I wanted to do well, that I had something important to share." She reached out and took Kola's hand. "Tomorrow matters. That's why you're scared. But Kola, everyone who loves you will be there. Me, Dad, even some of the teachers who see how hard you work. We believe in you. So even if you mess up, even if you fall, you'll still be our champion." Kola felt his throat tighten. He squeezed her hand. "Thank you. Besides," Amanda grinned, "I've seen you practice. You're going to blow everyone away." The morning of the talent show arrived with that peculiar mix of excitement and dread that comes before important moments. The entire school buzzed with energy. Students crowded around the auditorium entrance, chattering about the performances. Kola stood backstage, his stomach in knots. Through the curtain, he could hear the audience filling the seats. Parents, teachers, students, all waiting to be entertained or disappointed. Other performers crowded the wings. A girl warming up her violin, a boy rehearsing a magic trick. 2 girls in matching outfits going over their synchronized dance. And Brandon leaning against the wall with his friends, smirking in Kola's direction. "Good luck, street boy. Try not to trip over your own feet." Kola ignored him. He closed his eyes and took deep breaths, trying to calm his racing heart. The show began. One by one, performers took the stage. Some were brilliant, others struggled through nerves. The audience clapped politely for everyone, supportive, if not enthusiastic. Finally, the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. "Next up, performing an original dance routine, Kola Lawson," the crowd murmured. Kola could feel the curiosity, the skepticism, the whispers. "That's the kid Richard Lawson took in. Let's see if he's actually talented or just lucky. I heard he used to dance at traffic lights." Kola walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The audience was a dark mass beyond the brightness. For a terrifying moment, he could not remember his first move. Then he saw them front row, Amanda clapping already, her face glowing with pride. Richard beside her giving a small nod of encouragement. And next to Richard, Maya, and Jamal, his only real friends at school, both smiling. The music started. A pulsing beat that Kola had chosen because it reminded him of the rhythm of the city, the bus engines, the street vendors, the life he had known. Kola's body moved before his mind could overthink. He started slow, controlled movements that showed technique. Then he exploded into his signature style, spinning, popping, locking, adding elements of breakdancing mixed with the playful, exaggerated gestures that had made Amanda laugh that first afternoon. He told a story through movement, a story of struggle, of pain, of survival. And then, as the music shifted, a story of hope, of transformation, of joy rediscovered. The audience went silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of boredom, but the electric silence of people witnessing something real. Kola moved across the stage like he owned it. Every spin was precise. Every gesture carried meaning. He incorporated a moment where he pantomimed being invisible, people walking past him, through him. Then he exploded into visibility, demanding to be seen. It was raw, honest, powerful. When the music ended, Kola froze in his final pose, chest heaving. sweat dripping down his face. For one terrible second, there was silence. Then the auditorium erupted. Students jumped to their feet, screaming and clapping. Teachers stood, applauding loudly. Parents whistled. Even the kids who had whispered cruel things seemed caught up in the moment, forced to acknowledge what they had just witnessed. Cola straightened, stunned. This was not polite applause. This was genuine appreciation. Amanda was crying and clapping. Richard's eyes were wet. And throughout the crowd, Ka saw faces that had looked at him with contempt, now looking at him with respect. He had done it. He had exploded the box. As Cola left the stage, other performers congratulated him. The violin girl said it was the best thing she had ever seen. The magician gave him a fist bump. Even Brandon, standing in the wings, looked unsettled. He did not congratulate Cola, but he did not mock him either. Thesmark was gone. When the judges deliberated, the auditorium buzzed with speculation. But deep down, everyone knew. There had been good performances, but Colas's had been transcendent. The principal took the stage with an envelope. She smiled as she opened it. This year's talent show winner by unanimous decision is Cola Lawson. The crowd roared. Cola walked back onto the stage in a daze. They handed him a trophy, a gleaming thing that caught the stage lights, but the trophy did not matter. What mattered was Amanda's face, Richard's proud expression, the way students who had ignored him now wanted to talk to him. What mattered was that he had proven, at least for tonight, that he belonged. That evening, the Lawson mansion was transformed into a celebration venue. Richard had ordered catering, Filipino food, Italian, Chinese, everything Cola had mentioned liking. The staff decorated the dining room. Even the security guards joined in, toasting Cola's victory. Amanda refused to put the trophy down. She carried it around, showing it to everyone, beaming with pride. My brother won. My brother is a champion. Brother. The word hit Cola like a warm wave. He'd never had family before, but here in this moment, surrounded by people who genuinely cared, he felt it. Belonging, connection, love. Richard pulled him aside during the party, leading him to the quiet of the study. I'm proud of you, Richard said simply. Not because you won, but because you faced your fear and did it anyway. Cola felt emotion building in his chest. Thank you for everything, for giving me a chance when no one else would. Richard's expression grew serious. Cola, you've given us more than we've given you. You brought joy back into this house. You helped Amanda heal. You reminded me what matters. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I want to make this official. I want to legally adopt you, make you a Lawson, not just in name, but by law. What do you think? Cola could not speak. Tears streamed down his face. He had gone from sleeping under bridges to being offered a permanent family. The impossibility of it overwhelmed him. Yes, he finally managed. Yes, I want that. Richard pulled him into a hug. For both of them, it was a moment of healing. Richard, grieving his wife, found purpose in protecting this boy. Cola, abandoned and alone for so long, finally had a father. But while they celebrated, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond their gates, a man stood in the shadows across the street from the Lawson mansion. His name was Timothy Okafor, though he had gone by different names over the years. He was thin, worn down by guilt and poverty. His clothes were shabby. His hands shook. He had seen the news coverage of the talent show, seen Ka's face plastered across local media. From streets to spotlight, Lawson's adopted son shines. And Timothy knew with terrible certainty, knew what he had done, knew the secret he had carried for years, knew that it was time to come forward, no matter the cost. Because Cola was not just some random street kid who got lucky. Cola was Richard Lawson's biological son. Timothy had been there the night the twins were born. He'd been the nurse on duty when Elizabeth Lawson delivered. And he had been the one who, under pressure from a corrupt doctor, had separated the babies, intending to sell one to a wealthy family desperate for a child. But the deal had fallen through. The family wanted a girl. They'd rejected the baby boy. And Timothy, terrified of going to prison, had panicked. He had taken the infant, tried to raise him on his own while the doctor fled the country. For years, Timothy had told himself he was doing the right thing, that he was giving the boy a better life than he would have had in an institution. But as Cola grew and life became harder, as money ran out and Timothy's past caught up with him, he'd done the unthinkable. He had abandoned Cola on a street corner and disappeared. Now staring at the mansion, Timothy knew he had to confess. Not for redemption. He did not deserve that, but because Cola deserved to know the truth. Richard deserved to know his son had survived, and Amanda deserved to know she had not lost her twin in the accident, but years before to a crime Timothy had participated in. Tomorrow, Timothy decided, tomorrow he would knock on that gate and tell them everything. Even if it destroyed him, even if they called the police, even if he spent the rest of his life in prison. The truth had been buried long enough. Inside the mansion, the celebration continued. Cola danced with Amanda, both of them laughing, unaware that their entire world was about to shatter and reshape into something they could never have imagined. Richard watched them, his heart full, not knowing that in less than 24 hours he would learn a truth that would force him to question everything. His marriage, his grief, the very fabric of his family. The stage was set. The secret was ready to emerge, and tomorrow everything would change. If you think Timothy deserves forgiveness, comment forgive. If you think he deserves prison, comment prison. Let's settle this right now. Saturday morning dawned with the kind of California sky that made promises it could not keep. Clear, blue, perfect. The kind of day when you believed nothing bad could happen. Richard sat in his study reviewing adoption papers his attorney had drawn up. Making Cola his legal son would be complicated but not impossible. He had money, influence, connections. The courts would approve it within months. Amanda was in the garden with Cola, both of them still riding the high of yesterday's victory. Cola was teaching her a simple dance move, something she could do from her wheelchair. Their laughter drifted through the open windows. Everything felt right, settled, like pieces of a broken world finally clicking back together. Then the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Lawson," the voice of Marcus, the head of security. "There's a man at the front gate says he needs to speak with you urgently about Cola." "He seems distressed." Richard frowned. "Did he give a name?" "Timothy Okafor says you don't know him, but this is about Ka's past." Richard's first instinct was to send the man away. Cola's past was painful, and whatever this stranger wanted, it probably involved exploitation, a tabloid reporter, someone looking for money. But something in Marcus's tone made Richard pause. "Bring him to the house, but have 2 guards present and keep Cola and Amanda away for now." 10 minutes later, Richard stood in his formal living room, arms crossed, as Marcus escorted a thin, nervous man into the space. Timothy Okafor looked like he had not slept in days. His clothes were clean but worn. His eyes were red-rimmed. His hands would not stop shaking. "You have 5 minutes," Richard said coldly. "Explain." "What you want." Timothy swallowed hard. His voice came out cracked, barely above a whisper. "I don't want anything, Mr. Lawson. I came to tell you the truth about Cola, about your family." "What truth?" Timothy closed his eyes, gathering courage. When he opened them, tears streamed down his face. "Cola is your son, your biological son." The room went silent. Richard stared at the man, trying to process words that made no sense. "What are you talking about?" "Your wife, Elizabeth. When she gave birth 8 years ago, she didn't have one baby. She had twins." Richard felt the floor shift beneath him. "That's impossible. The doctors told us 1 baby, 1 daughter. They lied, or rather Dr. Marcus Chen lied." Timothy's voice grew stronger, the confession pouring out like poison he had held too long. He was the obstetrician, and he'd debts. Gambling debts to dangerous people. Someone approached him about aprivate adoption. A wealthy family willing to pay a fortune for a baby. Richard's hands clenched into fists. "You're insane." "I wish I was." Timothy pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I was the nurse on duty that night. Dr. Chen told your wife she was having 1 baby. But during delivery, when she was unconscious from the C-section, 2 babies came. A girl and a boy, twins." He handed the paper to Richard. It was old, wrinkled, but clearly official. A hospital log from the night of Amanda's birth. 2 entries, 2 babies born at 11:43 p.m., 1 female, 1 male. Richard's vision blurred. "This is fake. It has to be." "It's not. Dr. Chen altered the official records, but I kept this copy. Insurance, I told myself, in case he ever tried to blame me." Timothy took a shaky breath. "The plan was to tell you 1 baby died during delivery. But when Dr. Chen tried to complete the adoption deal, the family rejected the boy. They wanted a girl. Dr. Chen panicked. He gave the baby to me and told me to take care of it. He paid me $20,000 and disappeared. I heard later he fled to the Philippines." Richard could not breathe, could not think. The walls of his perfect life were crumbling. "You're lying. You want money? This is extortion." "I don't want money, Mr. Lawson. I want to confess." Timothy's voice broke. It tried to raise Cola. "I did, but I had no skills, no support. I moved constantly, afraid of being caught. Eventually I ran out of money. And when Cola got sick, when I couldn't afford medicine, Ty left him. I abandoned him on a street corner and ran." Timothy fell to his knees, sobbing. "I've lived with that guilt every day. And when I saw him on TV winning that talent show wearing your name, I knew I had to tell you. Head serves to know. You deserve to know." Richard's mind raced. This could not be true. Elizabeth would have known. The doctors would have told them. But then pieces started falling into place. Elizabeth's difficult pregnancy. The way she had been sedated heavily during delivery because of complications. The way Richard had been kept out of the room until everything was over. What if this man was telling the truth? The birthmark, Timothy said suddenly. Cola has a birthmark on his left shoulder blade shaped like a crescent moon. Amanda has the same mark. I saw it in photos from when she was younger before the accident. Richard's blood ran cold. Amanda did have that birthmark. He had never thought anything of it. Lots of children had birthmarks, but twins often shared them. I need proof, Richard said, his voice hollow. DNA tests. I need proof? Run the tests, Timothy said. I'll submit to anything. But Mr. Lawson, I'm telling you the truth. Cola is your son. He's been yours all along, and I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry for what I did. Richard stumbled backwards, sinking into a chair. If this was true, if Cola was his biological son, then everything changed. Cola had not just brought Amanda back to life. He had been bringing his own sister back to life. The boy he had invited into his home was not a stranger performing a miracle. He was family, reconnecting with family he did not know existed. The cruelty of it was staggering. Cola had spent years suffering on the streets, thinking he was alone, when all along he had a father and a sister living in luxury just across town. Where is Cola now? Timothy asked quietly. In the garden with his sister. The word felt different now, heavier. True in a way, Richard had not understood moments ago. Timothy nodded. You'll tell him? I don't know, Richard admitted. I don't know anything anymore. He looked at Timothy with a mixture of rage and pity. This man had stolen his son, had abandoned Cola to a life of suffering. Yet, he had also come forward when he could have stayed hidden. Leave, Richard said finally. Give your contact information to my security. I'll run DNA tests. And if this is true, if you're not lying, we'll figure out what happens next. Timothy nodded, standing on shaky legs. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. Not from you, not from Cola, but I needed you to know. He's yours. He's always been yours. After Timothy left, escorted out by security, Richard sat alone in the silent room. Through the window, he could see Cola and Amanda in the garden dancing together, laughing, his children, both of them. The weight of it crushed him. The years had suffered. The childhood stolen by a corrupt doctor and a weak nurse. The fact that Elizabeth had died, never knowing she had a son. That Amanda had grown up thinking she was an only child when her twin had been suffering mere miles away. Richard called his personal physician, Dr. Helen Santos. She arrived within the hour, discreet and professional. I need DNA tests, Richard said. Paternity tests, comparing my DNA to Cola's. Dr. Santos raised an eyebrow, but did not ask questions. Of course, I can draw blood now and have results in 72 hours, make it 48. And Helen, this stays between us until we know for certain. That afternoon, Richard called Cola into the study under the pretense of discussing the adoption paperwork. Cola called eagerly, excited, unaware. Just need a quick blood draw, Richard said casually. Standard procedure for adoption, legal stuff. Cola barely flinched when Dr. Santos inserted the needle. He was used to pain. A needle was nothing. After Cola left, Dr. Santos drew Richard's blood as well. Then she packaged both samples carefully. I'll put a rush on this, she said. And Mr. Lawson, whatever the results, you've already done an incredible thing for that boy. Richard nodded, but he could not speak, because if the results confirmed what Timothy had said, it meant Richard had not done something incredible. He had simply found what had been stolen from him. The next 48 hours were torture. Richard went through the motions of normal life, but his mind was elsewhere. He watched Cola and Amanda together, looking for similarities he had somehow missed. The way they laughed, the shape of their eyes, the curve of their smiles. How had he not seen it before? Or maybe he had seen it subconsciously, and that was why he had felt such an immediate connection to Cola. Why he had been willing to risk his reputation to bring a street kid into his home. Blood recognizes blood. On Monday afternoon, Dr. Santos called. Richard, the results are ready. I'm coming to the house. She arrived within the hour carrying a sealed envelope. They sat in the study, door closed, world narrowed to this single moment. Tell me, Richard said. Dr. Santos took a breath. The DNA test is conclusive. Cola is your biological son. 99.9% certainty. Richard, he's yours. The room spun. Even though Richard had suspected, hoped, feared, hearing the confirmation was different, real, undeniable. There's more, Dr. Santos said gently. I took the liberty of running a sibling comparison between Cola's DNA and a sample I had on file from Amanda's last checkup. They're full biological siblings, twins. Richard's hands shook as he took the envelope. The scientific proof laid out in charts and numbers that his son had been alive all along, surviving, dancing, fighting, alone. Tears streamed down Richard's face. Grief for the years lost. Rage at the people who had stolen his son. Relief that Cola was here now, safe. What are you going to tell him? Dr. Santos asked. The truth, Richard said. He deserves the truth. That evening after dinner, Richard asked Cola and Amanda to join him in the living room. He had sent the staff away. This moment needed to be private. Is something wrong? Amanda asked, sensing the gravity. No, sweetheart. Something is finally right. Richard looked at Cola. There's something you need to know about who you are, about where you came from. And slowly, carefully, Richard told them everything. About Timothy's confession, about Dr. Chen's crime, about the DNA tests, about the truth that had been buried for 8 years. Cola sat frozen, unable to process. Amanda's eyes grew wider with each sentence. You're saying? Cola whispered. I'm your son. Your real son? Yes. And Amanda is my twin sister. You were born together. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Amanda moved. She wheeled herself to Cola and threw her arms around him, sobbing. I knew it, she cried. I didn't know how, but I knew you were supposed to be here. I knew you were mine. Cola held her, tears streaming down his own face. I have a family. A real family. Richard knelt before them, wrapping his arms around both. You've always had a family, Cola. We just didn't know it. But now Wado, and nothing will ever separate us again. They cried together, grieving the years lost, celebrating the miracle of being reunited. The impossible truth that what had seemed like chance, a homeless boy dancing in a garden, had actually been fate bringing a family back together. Outside, the California sun set in shades of gold and crimson. And somewhere in the city, Timothy Okafor sat in his apartment, waiting for the consequences of his confession. But feeling lighter than he had in years, the truth was finally free, and with it, a family made whole. Be honest, would you have invited Cola into your home? The days following the revelation felt like living in a dream that Richard was afraid to wake from. Every morning, he would open his eyes and need a moment to remember. Cola was his son, not adopted, not charity, but his biological child, stolen at birth, and returned by a twist of fate so impossible it felt orchestrated by something beyond human understanding. Dr. Santos returned to the mansion 3 days later to discuss the medical implications. She sat with Richard in his study, coffee growing cold between them. I've reviewed Amanda's medical records alongside Cola's, she began. There are some remarkable findings. Richard leaned forward. Such as first the birth arc. Identical twins sharing distinctive markings is well documented. But there's more. I did some genetic testing looking at Amanda's paralysis. The accident damaged her spine, yes, but her recovery rate, the fact that she gained mobility at all, is extraordinary. She pulled out a tablet showing Richard complex charts. There's evidence suggesting that psychological factors were suppressing her physical healing. Depression, grief, trauma. Her body could heal, but her mind would not let it. And then Cola appeared, Richard said softly. Exactly. There's fascinating research on twin connections. Even twins separated at birth often report feeling drawn to each other. They sense when something is wrong with their sibling. It's not mystical. It's neurobiology. Their brains develop together in the womb, forming patterns that recognize each other on a molecular level. Richard thought about that first day, how Amanda had responded to Cola instantly, how her laughter had returned, how her body had begun to heal. What if it was not just joy? What if it was recognition? Her twin, her other half, finally returned to her. What about Cola? Richard asked. What does this mean for him? Physically, he's remarkably healthy considering his years on the street. Malnourished, yes, but resilient. Mentally, Dr. Santos paused. That's more complex. He's been alone his entire conscious memory. The psychological impact of suddenly having a family, of learning he was never truly abandoned by you. That's significant. He needs therapy. You all do, Dr. Santos said gently. This is trauma and miracle combined. You lost a son you did not know you had. Cola gained a father and sister. Amanda learned she is a twin. That's profound on every level. Richard nodded. He had already contacted a family therapist who specialized in adoption, loss, and reconnection. They would begin sessions the following week. But first, there were other matters to address. The legal questions came next. Richard's attorney, Gerald Mosley, arrived with a briefcase full of documents and a grave expression. Richard, this situation is unprecedented. Dr. Chen committed multiple crimes. Kidnapping, falsifying medical records, fraud. Timothy Afor was an accessory. The statute of limitations has not expired. Can we prosecute? We can, and honestly, we probably should. Dr. Chen is still at large. Timothy is within reach. But Richard, you need to consider what's best for Cola. Richard looked at the attorney. What do you mean? A criminal trial means publicity. National publicity. Cola's face plastered everywhere. His past dissected in court. Every painful detail of his childhood examined by strangers. Is that what you want for him? Richard had not considered that. He wanted justice. Wanted Dr. Chen behind bars. But at what cost to Hisson? What's the alternative? Civil suits, quiet settlements. We can still hold Timothy accountable without a media circus. And we can work with international authorities to locate Dr. Chen without making this a public spectacle. Richard thought about Kola, about the boy who had spent years invisible, ignored. How would he feel being thrust into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons? Let's keep it quiet, Richard decided. Pursue justice, but protect Ka's privacy. He's been through enough. Gerald nodded approvingly. I'll draw up the papers. That evening, Richard sat down with Kola in the garden, the same space where their journey had begun. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. How are you feeling? Richard asked. Kola took a long time to answer. I don't know. Happy, confused, angry, all of it at once. That's understandable. I keep thinking about Mom, Kola said quietly. Your wife, my mother. She died not knowing I existed. That hurts. Richard's chest tightened. Elizabeth would have loved you so much, but she never got the chance. And it's because some doctor wanted money. Kola's hands clenched. What happens to them? Dr. Chen and Timothy. Richard explained the legal strategy. Kola listened, his young face grave. I don't want a trial, he said finally. I don't want everyone knowing my business, but I do want them to pay somehow. They will, I promise, Cole nodded. Then he asked the question Richard had been dreading. Do you think you would have loved me if you found me another way? If I wasn't your son? Richard turned to face him fully. Kola, I loved you before I knew the truth. From the moment I saw you making Amanda laugh, risking yourself just to bring joy to a sad little girl, I knew you were special. The DNA test didn't change that. It just explained why the connection felt so immediate. Really, you are my son in every way that matters. Biology just confirms what my heart already knew. Kola's eyes filled with tears. I always wanted a dad. When I was on the streets, I would see fathers with their kids and wonder what it felt like. And now I know it feels like home. Richard pulled him into a hug, both of them crying. These were not tears of sadness, but of healing, of a broken family finding its way back together. Inside the house, Amanda watched from the window, her own tears falling. She wheeled herself to her room and opened a drawer where she kept her mother's jewelry. Elizabeth's wedding ring, her favorite necklace, a bracelet she had worn every day. Amanda picked up a small silver locket. Inside was a picture of Elizabeth holding newborn Amanda at the hospital. One baby, one moment frozen in time. But now Amanda knew there had been two. And while she could not change the past, she could honor it. She would tell Kola stories about their mother. Would share memories so he could know the woman who gave him life, even if he never got to meet her. They would grieve together, heal together, grow together as twins should. The media found out eventually. Someone at the hospital leaked fragments of the story. Within days, reporters camped outside the mansion gates. News helicopters circled overhead. The tabloids had a field day. Billionaire discovers homeless son was stolen at birth. Twin miraculously reunited after 8 years apart. The dance that saved a family. Richard handled it the only way he could. He gave one carefully prepared statement through his publicist, and then refused all further interviews. My family has been through a tremendous ordeal. We are grateful to be reunited, and ask for privacy as we heal together. We will not be making further public comments. Most media respected the boundary. A few did not. But Richard's legal team dealt with them swiftly. What Richard did do was use his influence quietly. He contacted the Philippine authorities about Dr. Chen made significant donations to organizations fighting human trafficking and illegal adoptions. He wanted something good to come from the horror his family had experienced. Timothy Okafor was a more complicated matter. Kola asked to meet him. Against the advice of the attorneys and therapists, Richard agreed. They met in a neutral location, a conference room at Gerald's law office. Timothy sat on one side of the table, looking older and more worn than when Richard had first met him. Kola and Richard sat across from him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kola broke the silence. Why did you leave me? Timothy flinched. Because I was a coward. Because I couldn't face what I had done. Because I thought if you were found alone, someone would take you to authorities, and you might find a better life than I could give you. I ended up on the streets. I know, and I'm sorry. There's no excuse, no justification. I stole your childhood because I was weak. Kola stared at him, trying to reconcile this broken man with the monster he had built in his mind. Do you know what it's like to sleep under a bridge? To go days without eating? To be invisible? No, then you don't know what you did to me. You're right, I don't. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make sense of it. Kola took a breath. The lawyers want to prosecute you. Jail time. But I get to decide, Timothy nodded, accepting. Whatever you choose, I'll accept. Kola looked at his father, then back at Timothy. I'm not like you. I won't let anger make me weak. You took 8 years from me, but I won't let you take any more. I won't spend my life hating you. He leaned forward. But I also won't forgive you. You don't deserve that. You'll live with what you did, and that's punishment enough. Richard felt pride surge through him. His son, this boy who had every reason to seek revenge, was choosing to let go instead, not for Timothy's benefit, but for his own. They left without shaking hands. Timothy remained in the conference room alone with his guilt. Outside, Cola took a deep breath of Los Angeles air. Is it wrong that I don't feel better? No, Richard said. Closure doesn't always bring relief. Sometimes it just brings clarity. I can live with clarity. 3 months after the truth emerged, the Lawson family found themselves at a cemetery in Glendale. Elizabeth's grave was well maintained, flowers regularly placed by Richard or Amanda. But today felt different. Today all 3 of them stood together. Richard, Amanda, and Cola, a family finally complete, even in grief. Mom, Amanda said softly, addressing the headstone. We brought someone to meet you, your son, our brother. Cola stepped forward, kneeling by the grave. He placed his hand on the cold marble. Hi, Mom. I'm Cola. I guess you didn't know about me, but I wish you had. I wish I could have met you, known you. But Dad tells me you were kind, loving, that you would have fought for me if you knew. Tears streamed down his face. I'm sorry I can't remember you. Sorry I never got to call you Mom, but I promise I'll take care of Amanda and Dad. I'll be the son you deserve to raise. I promise. Richard and Amanda joined him, all 3 kneeling together, a family joined in grief and love. They stayed until the sun began to set, talking to Elizabeth, sharing stories, making promises to honor her memory by loving each other fiercely. As they walked back to the car, Amanda took Cola's hand. She would have loved you. You know, you're exactly the kind of son she dreamed of. How do you know? Because she always said the best thing in life was joy. And you're made of joy, Cola. Even after everything, you choose joy. That's what she would have wanted. Cola smiled through his tears. Then I'll keep dancing for her, for us. That night, back at the mansion, Richard gathered his children in the living room. He had something prepared, something he had been working on since the DNA results came in. I want to show you something, he said, pulling out a large frame. It was a family portrait, professionally done. Richard, Amanda, and Cola together. But Richard had added something. Using old photos, the graphic designer had seamlessly incorporated Elizabeth into the image. She stood beside Richard, her hand on Ka's shoulder, smiling at the camera. What the photo shows, Richard said, is what should have been. Our family complete. Elizabeth might not be here physically, but she's part of us. Always. Amanda and Cola stared at the portrait, overwhelmed. This was what they had been denied, what Dr. Chen had stolen. But in a way, through love and determination, they had reclaimed it. We're a family, Cola whispered. We always were, Richard said. We just didn't know it. They hung the portrait in the main hallway where everyone who entered the house would see it. A reminder of what had been lost and what had been found. Life slowly settled into a new normal. Cola continued at Starlight Academy. His status no longer questioned. He was not the adopted street kid anymore. He was Richard Lawson's son, Amanda's twin. That carried its own weight, but Cola wore it with growing confidence. He auditioned for the school's advanced dance program and was accepted. He started teaching dance to younger kids at a community center Richard funded. He found purpose not just in performing, but in passing on the gift that had saved his life. Amanda continued her recovery stronger each day. She and Cola had a bond that mystified therapists. They could communicate without words, finish each other's sentences, sense when the other was troubled. Twin connection. Dr. Santos called it magic. Amanda called it family. Cola said Richard transformed too. The cold businessman who measured everything by profit margins learned to measure life by laughter, by dance, by the moments that could not be quantified. He cut back on work, spending more time with his children. He established foundations in Elizabeth's name, focused on children's welfare and adoption reform. He used his wealth not to build bigger empires, but to ensure neither child suffered as Cola had. 1 year after the truth emerged on the anniversary of that first dance in the garden, the Lawson family hosted a party. Not for business associates or social climbing, but for the people who mattered. Jamal and Maya from school, the staff who had believed in Cola from the start. Dr. Santos, Gerald the attorney, and yes, even some of the students from Starlight Academy, who had learned that judging someone by their past was a mistake. The garden was decorated with lights. Music played, and at the center of it all, Cola danced. But this time, he was not alone. Amanda stood beside him, her movement still careful but strong. Richard even joined them, embarrassed but happy, making a fool of himself to his children's delight. As the night wound down and guests departed, the 3 of them sat in the grass looking up at the stars. Do you think Mom is watching? Amanda asked. I know she is, Richard said. What do you think she thinks of us? Cola wondered. Richard considered. I think she's proud. Proud that we found each other. Proud that we chose love over anger. Proud that despite everything, we became who we were meant to be. A family, Amanda said. A family, Cola agreed. They sat in comfortable silence. Three people who had lost so much, but found something precious in the wreckage. Hope, connection, home. The stars above shone bright, as if offering their own approval. And in that moment, despite the pain of the past, despite the years stolen, despite the trauma that would never fully heal, the loss in family was complete. Not because DNA said so, though that mattered. Not because a court made it legal, though that helped. But because they had chosen each other, fought for each other, refused to let the cruelty of the world break what they had built. Love, as it turned out, was stronger than any crime, stronger than any lie, stronger than years of separation. Love had brought them together, and love would keep them whole. As Kala looked at his father and sister, he remembered the boy he had been, barefoot, hungry, invisible, dancing at traffic lights just to survive another day. That boy felt like a stranger now, because Cola was no longer fighting to survive. He was living, thriving, loving, and being loved in return. And that more than any DNA test or legal document made him exactly who he was always meant to be. Richard Lawsonson, Amanda Lawson's twin, a member of a family that had been broken but refused to stay shattered. The dance that had started in a garden had led them here, to this moment, to this truth, to this family. And as the California night embraced them, one thing was certain. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them together. Because they were family, and family, true family, was forever. 2 years had passed since that garden dance. Since the truth emerged, since the Lawson family was made whole. 2 years of healing, growth, and the kind of ordinary magic that comes from simply being together. Cola was now 14, taller, more confident, but still carrying that spark of joy that had defined him from the beginning. He had become a fixture in Los Angeles' dance community, teaching classes, performing at charity events, using his story to inspire other foster kids and orphans. Amanda was 10, walking without assistance. Her recovery so complete that doctors called it remarkable. She had returned to ballet, though she danced for joy now rather than perfection. She and Cola often performed together, their twin connection visible in every synchronized movement. Richard had stepped back from several business ventures, focusing on philanthropy and family. He had discovered something Elizabeth had tried to teach him years ago. The best investment was not in property or stock, but in people, in moments, in love. The Lawson Foundation, established in Elizabeth's name, had helped hundreds of children find permanent homes, funded medical care for kids who could not afford it, and supported arts programs in underserved communities. But the journey had not been without challenges. Cola still had nightmares about his years on the streets. Therapy helped, but some scars ran deep. Amanda struggled with survivor's guilt, wondering why she had grown up in luxury while her twins suffered. Richard carried regret that he had not somehow known, had not somehow prevented the theft of his son. But they worked through it together, and slowly the wounds healed. Not completely. Scars never fade entirely, but enough that they could look back without drowning in pain. One autumn afternoon, Cola and Amanda were in the garden, the same space where their story began. They were working on a dance routine for an upcoming performance at a children's hospital. Music played from a speaker. Their movements flowed together effortlessly. Richard watched from his study window, a small smile on his face. This had become his favorite pastime, simply watching his children exist. Laugh, live. His phone buzzed. A message from Gerald, the attorney. Dr. Marcus Chen arrested in Manila. Philippine authorities are processing extradition. Justice is finally coming. Richard felt satisfaction but not triumph. Revenge was not sweet. Justice was just necessary. He walked down to the garden to tell Cola his son deserved to know. When Richard shared the news, Cola nodded slowly. Good. He shouldn't be free after what he did. How do you feel? Richard asked. Cola considered. I thought I'd feel vindicated or happy, but I mostly feel sad. Sad that he valued money over a person's life. Sad that he made choices that hurt so many people. That's mature of you. I learned from the best. Cola smiled at his father. You taught me that being bitter doesn't change the past. It just ruins the present. Amanda joined them, wiping sweat from her forehead. What are we talking about? Dr. Chen was arrested, Cola explained. Amanda's face hardened. Good. He deserves whatever he gets. Unlike Cola, Amanda had not found forgiveness. She was still angry at everyone who had stolen her twin from her, who had robbed her of 8 years with her brother. Richard did not push her. Everyone processed trauma differently. The trial will be public, Richard said. Our names will be in the news again. Are you both prepared for that? Let them talk. Cola shrugged. Our story isn't about him. It's about us. About how we found each other. That's what matters. That evening, The family gathered for dinner, a tradition they maintained religiously. No phones, no work, just the three of them sharing food and conversation. "I got an email today," Cola said between bites of pasta. "From a documentary filmmaker wants to tell our story. Says it could inspire people." Richard raised an eyebrow. "What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it, but honestly, I'm not sure I want our whole life examined by strangers." "Then don't do it," Amanda said firmly. "Our story is ours. We don't owe it to anyone." "But what if it helps someone?" Cola countered. "What if there's a kid out there living on the streets who needs to hear that things can get better?" The table fell silent. This was the dilemma Cola faced constantly. History could help others, but sharing it meant reliving trauma. Was the cost worth the potential benefit? "Tell you what," Richard said. "Sleep on it. If you still feel called to share after a few days, we'll talk about it seriously. But Cola, never feel pressured to expose your pain for others' benefit. You don't owe the world your suffering." Cola nodded, grateful for the wisdom. This was what having a father meant. Having someone to help navigate difficult choices. Having a voice of experience to balance his own uncertainty. After dinner, as Amanda practiced piano in the living room and Richard returned emails in his study, Cola slipped out to the garden, the same garden where everything began. He stood in the spot where he had first danced for a sad girl in a wheelchair. The grass was still perfectly maintained, the flowers still bloomed, but the energy was different now, less desperate, more peaceful. "Thank you," Cola whispered to the universe. Or God, or fate, or whatever force had led him to this gate 2 years ago. "Thank you for second chances," a voice came from behind him. "Talking to yourself?" Cola turned to find Amanda wheeling herself onto the lawn. Though she could walk, she still used her wheelchair when tired. Some habits, good and bad, were hard to break. "Just reflecting," Ka said, thinking about how different life could have been. Amanda joined him, looking at the same spot. "Do you ever wish you had known from the beginning that you were my twin?" "Sometimes, but then I think maybe it happened exactly as it needed to. Maybe I needed to be that boy on the streets first, to understand pain and struggle, so I could appreciate this." He gestured to the mansion, to her, to everything. "If I had grown up with you, maybe I'd be spoiled, entitled. Maybe I wouldn't value what we have. Or maybe you'd just have been happy," Amanda said softly. "You deserved to be happy from the start, Cola. You deserved Mom. You deserved me. You deserved Dad. What happened to you wasn't some cosmic lesson. It was just cruel." Cola sat down beside her wheelchair. "You're right. It was cruel and unfair and wrong. But I can't change it. All I can do is decide what it means now. And what does it mean? It means I know the value of a home, of family, of love. Most rich kids take that for granted. I never will. So yeah, it was cruel, but it also made me who I am. And I kind of like who I am." Amanda smiled through tears. "I like who you are, too. I love who you are." They sat together as the sun set, two halves of a whole, finally reunited and determined never to be separated again. Inside, Richard had finished his emails and was reviewing the final details for Ka's legal adoption. Though they knew the biological truth, making it official through the courts mattered symbolically. Next week, they would stand before a judge, and Cola would officially, legally, irreversibly become Cola Richard Lawson. Not just in spirit, not just in DNA, but in the eyes of the law. A family made whole. As Richard signed the papers, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost did not answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Lawson, this is Sister Margaret from St. Vincent's Children's Home. We received your generous donation last month, and I wanted to call personally to thank you. Your foundation is changing lives." Richard smiled. "That's kind of you to say, sister. I mean it. Just last week, a 7-year-old boy who had been in the system for years found a permanent home. Your funding made that possible. He has a family now because of you." Richard's throat tightened. "I'm glad we could help. May I ask what inspired such generosity, if you don't mind me asking?" Richard looked out the window at his children sitting together in the fading light. "I'm just trying to make sure no child suffers the way my son did. Every kid deserves a home, a family, love. I can't save everyone, but I can try." "You're doing more than trying, Mr. Lawson. You're succeeding. Thank you." After hanging up, Richard felt that familiar warmth in his chest. Purpose, legacy, the knowledge that he was using his wealth for something that mattered. Elizabeth would be proud. The night before the final adoption hearing, Cola could not sleep. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. What if something went wrong? What if some legal technicality prevented it? What if the universe decided he did not deserve this happiness? A knock on his door interrupted his spiral. "Can't sleep either," Richard's voice. "No." Richard entered, sitting on the edge of Ka's bed like he had done countless times over the past 2 years. These late-night talks had become sacred. Father and son processing the impossible journey they'd shared. Nervous about tomorrow. Terrified, Cola admitted. "Why? What if it doesn't work out?" What if something goes wrong? Richard took Cola's hand. Listen to me. That courtroom tomorrow is a formality. You became my son the moment you danced in that garden. The moment you made Amanda laugh. The moment I decided that no force on earth would separate us. The judge's signature just makes it official. But what if? No what ifs, Richard interrupted gently. You're mine, Cola. Not because of biology, though, that's incredible. Not because of paperwork, though that's important, but because I choose you every single day. I choose you, and nothing will ever change that. Cola's eyes filled with tears. I choose you too, Dad. The word Dad still felt new, special, precious. Cola used it carefully, reverently, remembering all the years he had longed to say it to someone, anyone. Get some rest, Richard said, standing. Tomorrow we make it official. The courtroom was smaller than Cola expected, less dramatic. Just a judge, some lawyers, and the three of them, Richard, Amanda, and Cola. Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the paperwork carefully. She looked over her glasses at Cola. Young man, do you understand what's happening today? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Lawson is adopting me, legally making me his son. And is this what you want? Cola looked at Richard, then at Amanda, his family, his home. More than anything, Judge Morrison smiled. Something judges were not supposed to do in court, but she could not help it. I've reviewed your case. It's extraordinary, tragic, and beautiful in equal measure. The court finds that this adoption is in the best interest of the child. Cola, from this moment forward, you are Cola Richard Lawson. Congratulations. She signed the final papers with a flourish. It was done. Official. Irreversible. Cola was legally permanently part of the Lawson family. They celebrated with lunch at Cola's favorite restaurant, a small Filipino place in historic Filipino town, where the food reminded him of the few good memories from his street days. To family, Richard toasted with lemonade. To second chances, Amanda added. To Love, Cola finished. Their glasses clinked it, sealing the moment. That afternoon, back at the mansion, Cola retreated to his room. He needed a moment alone to process everything. 2 years ago, he had been nobody. No name that mattered, no home, no future. Now, he was Cola Richard Lawson. He had a father who loved him, a sister who understood him, a future bright with possibility. He pulled out a small box from his drawer. Inside was a collection of items from his street days, a coin someone had given him, a torn photo of a sunset he had found in the trash, a broken bracelet, reminders of who he had been. Cola held each item, remembering the pain, the hunger, the cold, the invisibility. He had survived all of that, and now he was thriving. He put the items back in the box and placed it on his shelf. Not to forget, but to remember, because his past was part of him. It had shaped him into the person he was today. And that person was pretty amazing. A few weeks later, Cola made his decision about the documentary filmmaker. He said yes, but with conditions. He would tell his story on his terms, focus on hope rather than trauma, show that second chances were possible. The documentary, titled The Dance That Changed Everything, premiered a year later. It told the Lawson family's journey with sensitivity and power. Within weeks, it had been viewed millions of times. Donations to orphanages and foster programs skyrocketed. Legislators began discussing adoption reform. Cola's story was changing the world. But more importantly, it was reminding people of a simple truth. Every child deserves love. Every child deserves a chance. Every child deserves a family. Years passed. Cola graduated from Starlight Academy at the top of his class. He was accepted to Juilliard on a full scholarship, majoring in dance and choreography. Amanda followed in his footsteps, becoming a dancer herself, though her passion was ballet rather than street performance. Richard lived to see his children thrive. He walked Amanda down the aisle at her wedding. He sat front row at Cola's first major choreography debut. He became a grandfather to 3 beautiful children, who called him Grandpa, and listened with wide eyes to the story of Uncle Cola's impossible journey. And on quiet evenings when the house was peaceful and the grandchildren were asleep, Richard would sit in his study and look at that family portrait. Elizabeth smiling down at them all. He would whisper to her, telling her about the children, about the life they had built from the ashes of tragedy. We did it, Elizabeth. We found him, and he's everything you would have hoped for. And though Elizabeth could not answer, Richard felt her presence in Cola's laughter, in Amanda's strength, in the love that filled every corner of their home. The story that began with a homeless boy dancing in a garden had become a legacy, a testament to resilience, to love, to the impossible becoming possible when people refused to give up. Cola never forgot where he came from. He used his platform to advocate for homeless youth, to fund shelters, to ensure that other kids did not suffer as he had. He became a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the forgotten. And every year on the anniversary of that first dance, Cola would return to the garden. He would stand in the same spot and remember Remember the barefoot boy who had nothing but joy. Remember the sad girl who had forgotten how to smile. Remember the father who had lost everything and found it again in the most unexpected way. And then Kola would dance, not for an audience, not for applause, but for himself, for his sister, for his father, for his mother who watched from somewhere beyond. He would dance because that's what had saved him. Dance had been his language when he had no words, his hope when despair threatened to consume him, his gift when he had nothing else to give, and dance had brought him home. As Kola spun in the California sun, his shadow stretching across the perfect grass, he felt complete, whole, loved. He was no longer the street kid dancing for coins, no longer the orphan sleeping under bridges, no longer the lost boy searching for belonging. He was Kola Richard Lawson, son, brother, artist, survivor, Thor. And he was exactly where he was meant to be, home. Now it's your turn. So, what would you have done if you discovered your child was stolen at birth and had been suffering for years while you lived in luxury? Could you forgive the people responsible? Could you let go of the anger and focus on the miracle of being reunited? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from you. And if you think what Dr. Chen did was unforgivable, if you believe every child deserves to know their real family, comment family is everything right now. This story isn't just about the Lawson. It's about all of us, about how we treat the vulnerable, about second chances, about the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about homeless kids, or adoption, or the invisible threads that connect us all, then hit that subscribe button, because I'm bringing you more stories like this. Real stories, powerful stories, stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew. And trust me, the next one will shock you even more. I've just discovered a story about a teacher who recognized her missing daughter in one of her students 20 years after the kidnapping. What happens next will break your heart and put it back together again. But you'll only hear that story if you subscribe. So don't miss out. Click that button, turn on notifications, join our community of people who believe in hope, redemption, and the power of love. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing: to be seen, to be loved, to belong. Kola found that against impossible odds, and his story proves that miracles are real, that families can be rebuilt, that joy is stronger than suffering. So here's my challenge to you. Look at the people around you, the ones you might normally ignore. The homeless person on the corner, the kid at school who sits alone, the stranger struggling. What if that's someone's Kola? What if one act of kindness could change their entire life? You have that power. We all do. Use it because you never know. That dance you share, that smile you give, that hand you extend might just be the beginning of someone's miracle. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of this community. Remember, only people who support lies and manipulation would refuse to subscribe. But you're not that person. You're someone who believes in truth, in love, in second chances. So subscribe, comment, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep dancing, keep hoping, keep loving, because that's how miracles happen.